Starting a stream. Starting off strong. My Singing Monsters. Why is that so bright? Wait. You see that? Yeah, there we go. Let me turn it up a bit more. And I'm about to get the chest right here. Come on. Come on. Ooh, what is that? What'd I get? 2 diamonds. Oh. Not bad, actually. Not too shabby. I just watched Project Hail Mary. Wow, this is a phenomenal movie. Absolutely phenomenal. I would put this in my top 10. Not even gonna lie. Absolutely phenomenal movie. Wow. Honestly, just wow. This is a really, really good movie. Very similar to The Martian. I would argue it's better than The Martian. But it's gonna be up there like The Martian. I can tell it's gonna be one of those movies that like is up there. Okie dokie. Okay, Obsidian. Oh, we got Obsidian CLI now, eh? That's pretty cool. How do you open it? I don't know. Okay, stream goals. I need to read shortened version of The Idiot by Dostoevsky, if that's how you say his name. I need to model on my writing. Then I need to work on training model and gather model traces for Hermes agent. I need to get some model traces pretty badly. I'll work on that. I think that's really all I need to do. Bum bada bum bum. La 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 la. I need to finish comp sci assignment, and then I need to go to the washroom, but I forgot. I got a new uninterrupted power supply, aka a UPS. I've already been gone for over 50% of the stream. Ooh, Bia Heza posted. I like that guy. I got a new uninterrupted power supply. Let me pop out the chat just in case. AKA a UPS. I've already been gone for but one of the cool things is it has a USB-C on the front. And that means, for one, I can charge my... Actually, let me plug it into my laptop. I want to see the wattage it outputs. It's more info, system report. Yikes, I gotta do something for that storage. Then it's under power. 10 watts, yikes, that's actually pretty bad. It's fine, it's fine. It's not terrible. But now I can charge my phone through something on my desk. It's amazing. It's like this new technology. Okay. Let me check my Hugging Face. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, na, 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 na. Hacker News. A complete archive of Hacker News. Fascinating. Wow, 62 to 100,000 to 4.6 million being its max. 2026 really fell off. I'm a genius. How big is it? Yeah, I guess it doesn't say. Pretty nifty. 3000x filtered auto Genshin voice. Z-Claw stepped. Oh, that's kind of cool. SFT data, supervised fine-tuning data. So what I want to do is I want to go to ChatGPT, the idiot abridged. I want to get the idiot abridged. And it's kind of tragic, but I think I can get it done. The idiot Michael Sheen Audible. I think you can get on Audible. Michael Sheen, $9. This is audible.com. Shucks. Yeah, Audible.ca. Are you serious? Dramatized. Where'd it go? The idiot livre audio? Are you serious? Oh. Holy leaked address. It's okay. It's okay. Oh my god. That's okay. It's okay. That's really annoying. Let me just do some research in another tab real quick. La, 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 la. Oh, I found it. La, 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 la. Okay, well, I guess I can bring it back here. It doesn't actually matter. Okay, maybe I shouldn't. I'm just going to turn it off. Okay. Now I get to listen to this. It only has 1 rating.
This is Audible.
City at full speed. The Idiot by Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky. Towards the end of November, during a thaw, at 9 o'clock one morning, a train on the Warsaw and Petersburg Railway was approaching the latter city at full speed. The morning was so damp and misty that it was only with great difficulty that the day succeeded in breaking, and it was impossible to distinguish anything more than a few yards away from the carriage windows. Some of the passengers on this particular train were returning from abroad, but the third-class carriages were the best filled, chiefly with insignificant persons of various occupations and degrees, picked up at the different stations near a town. All of them seemed weary, and most of them had sleepy eyes and a shivering expression, while their complexions generally appeared to have taken on the colour of the fog outside. When day dawned, 2 passengers in one of the third-class carriages found themselves opposite each other. Both were young fellows, both were rather poorly dressed, both had remarkable faces, and both were evidently anxious to start a conversation. One of them was a young fellow of about 27, not tall, with black curling hair and small grey fiery eyes. His nose was broad and flat, and he had high cheekbones. His thin lips were constantly compressed into an impudent, ironical, it might almost be called a malicious smile. But his forehead was high and well-formed, and atoned for a good deal of the ugliness of the lower part of his face.
Do we really think this is the entire book? I feel like this isn't the entire book. Technically, this is the abridged version, but... Okay, like, what? Dom, boom, boom. Okay. What are the chapters? It's really weird here. How is the second and third chapter 20 seconds?
A special feature of this physiognomy was its death-like pallor, which gave to the whole man an indescribably emaciated appearance, in spite of his hard look, and at the same time a sort of passionate and suffering expression, which did not harmonize with his impudent, sarcastic smile and keen, self-satisfied bearing. He wore a large fur, or rather astrakhan, overcoat, which had kept him warm all night, while his neighbour had been obliged to bear the full severity of a Russian November night entirely unprepared. His wide sleeveless mantle with a large cape to it, the sort of cloak one sees upon travellers during the winter months in Switzerland or North Italy, was by no means adapted to the long, cold journey through Russia from Edkunen to St. Petersburg. The wearer of this cloak was a young fellow, also of about 26 or 27 years of age, slightly above the mid...
Oh, fascinating. Well, here we go. And apparently it's 7 pages. On the train to St. Petersburg. All right. Where? I don't understand what these are supposed to be. Okay.
Middle height, very fair, with a thin, pointed, and very light-coloured beard. His eyes were large and blue, and had an intent look about them, yet that heavy expression which some people affirm to be a peculiarity, as well as evidence of an epileptic subject. His face was decidedly a pleasant one for all that, refined, but quite colourless, except for the circumstance that at this moment it was blue with cold. He held a bundle made up of an old faded silk handkerchief that apparently contained all his travelling wardrobe, and wore thick shoes and gaiters, his whole appearance being very un-Russian. His black-haired neighbour inspected these peculiarities, having nothing better to do, and at length remarked, with that rude enjoyment of the discomforts of others which the common classes so often show, "Cold?" "Very," said his neighbour readily. "And this is a thaw, too. Fancy if it had been a hard frost. I never thought it would be so cold in the old country. I've grown quite unaccustomed to it." "What, been abroad, I suppose?" "Yes, straight from Switzerland." "Whew, my goodness!" The black-haired young fellow whistled and then laughed. The conversation proceeded. The readiness of the fair-haired young man in the cloak to answer all his opposite neighbour's questions was surprising. He seemed to have no suspicion of any impertinence or inappropriateness in the fact of such questions being put to him. Replying to them, he made known to the inquirer that he certainly had been long absent from Russia, more than 4 years, that he had been sent abroad for his health, that he had suffered from...
I realized I should have something running while I'm doing this. So I'm gonna have bum 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 la 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 la. The 100 tasks are generated in Task Library. 25 no-tool tasks, 30 file edit tasks, 15 terminal log tests, 30 execute code tasks. Each task expects response exact. Okay. Then I add a small bonus if the model used the preferred tool for the task and if a penalty. Hermes agent itself runs an OpenAI itself. How much money do I have? $9. La 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 la. Bum, ba-da-bum, bum, bum, ba-da-bum. That doesn't leak the entire thing, right? No. So we're good. Here is my API. Open rotor API. Dun 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 la la. Okay, so I just got Codex working on making something to evaluate
some strange nervous malady, a kind of epilepsy with convulsive spasms. His interlocutor burst out laughing several times at his answers, and more than ever, when to the question whether he had been cured, the patient replied, "No, they did not cure me." "Hey, that's it. You stumped up your money for nothing, and we believe in those fellows here," remarked the black-haired individual sarcastically. "Gospel truth, sir, gospel truth," exclaimed another passenger, a shabbily dressed man of about 40, who looked like a clerk, and possessed a red nose and a very blotchy face. His name was Lebedev. "Gospel truth. All they do is to get hold of our good Russian money free, gratis, and for nothing." "Oh, but you're quite wrong in my particular instance," said the Swiss patient quietly. "Of course I can't argue the matter because I know only my own case, but my doctor gave me money, and he had very little to pay my journey back, besides having kept me at his own expense while there for nearly 2 years." "Why? Was there no one else to pay for you?" asked the black-haired one. "No, Mr. Pavlichev, who had been supporting me there, died a couple of years ago. I wrote to Mrs. General Yepanchin at the time. She is a distant relative of mine, but she did not answer my letter, and so eventually I came back." "And where have you come to?" "That is, where am I going to stay? I really don't quite know yet. Both the listeners laughed again. Mrs. Yepanchin. Oh, yes, a most eminent person. I know her. As for Mr. Pavlichev, who supported you in Switzerland, I know him too. At least, if it was Nikolai Andreevich of that name. Fine fellow he was, and had a property of 4,000 souls in his day." "Yes, Nikolai Andreevich, that was his name." And the young fellow looked earnestly and with curiosity at the all-knowing gentleman with the red nose. During the latter part of the conversation, the black-haired young man had become very impatient. He stared out of the window, and fidgeted, and evidently longed for the end of the journey. He was very absent. He would appear to listen, and heard nothing, and he would laugh of a sudden, evidently with no idea of what he was laughing about. "Excuse me," said Lebedev to the young fellow with the bundle, rather suddenly. "Whom have I the honour to be talking to?" "Prince Lev Nikolaevich Mushkin," replied the latter with perfect readiness. "Prince Mushkin? Lev Nikolaevich? I don't know, I'm sure. I may say I've never heard of such a person," said the clerk, thoughtfully. "Of course not," replied the prince. "There are none except myself. I believe I'm the last and only one. As to my forefathers, they've always been a poor lot. My own father was a sub-lieutenant in the army. I don't know how Mrs. Yepanchin comes into the Mushkin family, but she is descended from the Princess Mushkin, and she too is the last of her line." "And did you learn science and all that with your professor over there?" asked the black-haired passenger. "Oh, yes, I did learn a little." "I've never learned anything whatever," said the other. "Do you know the Rogozhins?" asked his questioner abruptly. "No, I don't, not at all. I hardly know anyone in Russia. Why, is that your name?" "Yes, I am Rogozhin, Parfyon Rogozhin." "Parfyon Rogozhin? Dear me. Then don't you belong to those very Rogozhins, perhaps?" began the clerk with a very perceptible increase of civility in his tone. "Yes, those very ones," interrupted Rogozhin impatiently and with scant courtesy. "Dear me. Is it possible?" observed the clerk, while his face assumed an expression of great deference and civility, if not of absolute alarm. "What, a son of that very Semyon Rogozhin, hereditary honourable citizen, who died a month or so ago and left 2,500,000 of roubles?" "And how do you know that he left 2,500,000 of roubles?" asked Rogozhin disdainfully, and not deigning so much as to look at the other. "However, it's true enough that my father died a month ago, and that here am I returning from Pskov a month after with hardly a boot to my foot. They've treated me like a dog. I've been ill of fever at Pskov the whole time, and not a line nor a farthing of money have I received from my mother or my confounded brother. 5 weeks since, I was just like yourself," continued Rogozhin, addressing the prince, "with nothing but a bundle and the clothes I wore. I ran away from my father and came to Pskov to my aunt's house, where I caved in at once with fever, and he went and died while I was away. All honour to my respected father's memory, but he uncommonly nearly killed me all the same. Give him my word, prince, if I hadn't cut and run then when I did, he'd have murdered me like a dog. I suppose you angered him somehow?" asked the prince, looking at the millionaire with considerable curiosity. "Oh, yeah."
I mean, kind of bad at listening to audiobooks. I'm always thinking about something else, but it usually goes in my brain a little bit. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. It's been a bunch of Kimmy.
I angered him. I certainly did anger him, replied Rogojin. What annoys me so much is my brother. Of course my mother couldn't do anything, she's too old. Whatever Brother Schenker says is law for her. But why couldn't he let me know? He sent a telegram, they say. What's the good of a telegram? It frightened my aunt so that she sent it back to the office unopened, and there it's been ever since. It's only thanks to Konyev that I heard it all. He wrote me all about it. He says my brother cut off the gold tassels from my father's coffin at night, because they're worth a lot of money, says he. Well, I can get him sent off to Siberia for that alone if I like. It's sacrilege. They will think that I'm still ill, continued Rogojin to the prince. But I sloped off quietly, seedy as I was, took the train, and came away. Brother Schenker, you'll have to open your gates and let me in, my boy. I know he told tales about me to my father. I know that well enough. But I certainly did rile my father about Nastasia Philippovna. That's very sure. And that was my own doing. Nastasia Philippovna, said the clerk Lebedev, as though trying to think out something. Come, you know nothing about her, said Rogojin impatiently. And supposing I do know something, observed the other triumphantly. Bosh, there are plenty of Nastasia Philippovnas. What an impertinent beast you are, he added angrily. I thought some creature like you would hang on to me as soon as I got hold of my money. Oh, but I do know, as it happens, said the clerk in an aggravating manner. Lebedev knows all about her. You are pleased to reproach me, Your Excellency. But what if I prove that I am right after all? Nastasia Philippovna's family name is Barashkov. I know, you see. And she is a very well-known lady indeed, and comes of a good family, too. She is connected with one Afanasy Ivanovich Totsky, a man of considerable property, a director of companies and so on, and a great friend of General Yapanchin, who is interested in the same matters as his. My eyes, said Rogojin, really surprised at last. The devil take the fellow. How does he know that? Why, he knows everything. Lebedev knows everything. Totsky takes her to his box at the opera at the French Theatre of an evening, and the officers and people all look at her and say, by Jove, there's the famous Nastasia Philippovna. But no one ever gets any further than that, for there is nothing more to say. Yes, it's quite true, said Rogojin, frowning gloomily. So my friend Zaleshov told me. I was walking about the Nevsky one fine day, Prince, in my father's old coat, when she suddenly came out of a shop and stepped into a carriage. I swear I was all of a blaze at once. Then I met Zaleshov, looking like a hairdresser's assistant. Got up as fine as I don't know who, while I looked like a tinker. Don't flatter yourself, my boy, said he. She's not for such as you. She's a princess, she is, and her name is Nastasia Philippovna Barashkov, and she lives with Totsky, who wishes to get rid of her because he's growing rather old, 55 or so, and wants to marry a certain beauty, the loveliest woman in all Petersburg. And then he told me that I could see Nastasia Philippovna at the opera house that evening if I liked, and described which was her box. Well, I'd had to go see my father allowing any of us to go to the theatre. He'd sooner have killed us any day. However, I went for an hour or so, and saw Nastasia Philippovna. And I never slept a wink all night after. I tell you, I hadn't a notion of what was about me, or before me, or below my feet. The train was just steaming into Petersburg when he finished. Though Rogojin had declared that he left Pskov secretly, a large collection of friends had assembled to greet him, and did so with profuse waving of hats and shouting. Then he suddenly turned to the prince. Prince, I don't know why I've taken a fancy to you. Perhaps because I met you just when I did. But no, it can't be that, for I met this fellow, nodding at Lebedev, too, and I've not taken a fancy to him by any means. Come to see me, Prince. We'll take off those gaiters of yours, and dress you up in a smart fur coat, the best we can buy. You shall have a dress coat, best quality, white waistcoat, anything you like, and your pocket shall be full of money. Come, and you shall go with me to Nastasia Philippovna's. Now then, will you come or no? Accept, Prince Lev Nikolaevich, said Lebedev solemnly. Don't let it slip. Accept, quick. Prince Mushkin rose and stretched out his hand courteously, while he replied with some cordiality, I will come with the greatest pleasure, and thank you very much for taking a fancy to me. Are you fond of the ladies, Prince? Tell me in good time. Me? No. You see, oh, perhaps you don't know, but you see, I've been ill since I was a child, and I have no knowledge at all of women. Well, Rogojin cried, if that is so, then you are a regular holy fool, Prince, and such as you God loves. And such the Lord loveth, Lebedev echoed. Well, here, you fellow. You can come along with me now, if you like, cried Rogojin to Lebedev, and so they all left the carriage. Lebedev had his desire. He went off with a noisy group of Rogojin's friends towards the Voznesensky, while the prince's route lay towards the Litanaya. It was damp and wet. The prince asked his way of passers-by, and finding that he was a couple of miles or so from his destination, he determined to take a droshky. General Yapanchin lived in his own house near the Litanaya. Besides this large residence, 5/6 of which was let in flats and lodgings, the general was owner of another enormous house in the Sadovaya, bringing in even more rent than the first. Besides these houses, he had a delightful little estate just out of town, and some sort of factory in another part of the city. General Yapanchin, as everyone knew, had a good deal to do with certain government monopolies. He was also a voice, and an important one, in many rich public companies of various descriptions. In fact, he enjoyed the reputation of being a well-to-do man of busy habits, many ties, and affluent means. As to age, General Yapanchin was in the very prime of life, that is, about 55 years of age, the flowering time of existence, when real enjoyment of life begins. The general was lord of a flourishing family, consisting of his wife and 3 grown-up daughters. He had married young, while still a lieutenant, his wife being a girl of about his own age, who possessed neither beauty nor education, and who brought him no more than 50 souls of landed property, which little estate served, however, as a nest egg for far more important accumulations. The general never regretted his early marriage, or regarded it as a foolish, youthful escapade, and he so respected and feared his wife that he was very near loving her. Mrs. Yepanchin came of the princely stock of Mushkin, which, if not a brilliant, was, at all events, a decidedly ancient family, and she was extremely proud of her descent. During these last few years, all 3 of the general's daughters, Alexandra, Adelaida, and Aglaya, had grown up and matured. Of course, they were only Yepanchins, but their mother's family was noble. They might expect considerable fortunes. Their father had hopes of attaining to very high rank indeed in his country's service, all of which was satisfactory. All 3 of the girls were decidedly pretty, even the eldest, Alexandra, who was just 25 years old. The middle daughter was now 23, while the youngest, Aglaya, was 20. This youngest girl was absolutely a beauty, and had begun of late to attract considerable attention in society. But this was not all, for every one of the 3 was clever, well-educated, and accomplished. They were in no hurry to marry. They liked good society, but were not too keen about it. All this was the more remarkable because everyone was well aware of the hopes and aims of their parents. It was about 11 o'clock in the forenoon when the prince rang the bell at General Yepanchin's door. The general lived on the first floor or flat of the house, as modest a lodging as his position permitted. A liveried servant opened the door, and the prince was obliged to enter into long explanations with this gentleman, who, from the first glance, looked at him and his bundle with grave suspicion. At last, however, on the repeated positive assurance that he really was Prince Mushkin, and must absolutely see the general on business, the bewildered domestic showed him into a little antechamber leading to a waiting room that adjoined the general's study, there handing him over to another servant, whose duty it was to be in this antechamber all the morning and announce visitors to the general. This second individual wore a dress coat, and was some 40 years of age. He was the general's special study servant, and well aware of his own importance. "Wait in the next room, please, and leave your bundle here," said the doorkeeper, as he sat down comfortably in his own easy chair in the antechamber. He looked at the prince in severe surprise, as the latter settled himself in another chair alongside, with his bundle on his knees. "If you don't mind, I would rather sit here with you," said the prince. "I should prefer it to sitting there." "Oh, but you can't stay here. You are a visitor, a guest, so to speak. Is it the general himself you wish to see?" The man evidently could not take in the idea of such a tabby-looking visitor, and had decided to ask once more. "Yes, I have business," began the prince. "I do not ask you what your business may be. All I have to do is to announce you, and unless the secretary comes in here, I cannot do that. Don't you think you might go in yourself now, without waiting for the secretary to come out?" "No, no. I can't." Can't announce a visitor like yourself without the secretary. Look here, at all events, put your bundle down here. It is much warmer in the rooms here than it is abroad at this season, observed the prince. But it is much warmer there out of doors. As for the houses, a Russian can't live in them in the winter until he gets accustomed to them. Don't they heat them at all? Well, they do heat them a little, but the houses and stoves are so different to ours. Were you long away? 4 years, and I was in the same place nearly all the time, in one village. Did you live in Petersburg in former years? This good flunky, in spite of his conscientious scruples, really could not resist continuing such a very genteel and agreeable conversation. In Petersburg? Oh no, hardly at all. And now they say so much has changed in the place that even those who did know it well are obliged to relearn what they knew. They talk a good deal about the new law courts and changes there, don't they? Yes, that's true enough. Well now, how is the law over there? Do they administer it more justly than here? Oh, I don't know about that. I've heard much that is good about our legal administration too. There is no capital punishment here, for one thing. Is there over there? Yes, I saw an execution in France, at Lyon. What, did they hang the fellow? No, they cut off people's heads in France. What did the fellow do? Yell? Oh no, it's the work of an instant. They put a man inside a frame, and a sort of broad knife falls by machinery. They call the thing a guillotine. It falls with fearful force and weight. The head springs off so quickly that you can't wink your eye in between. But all the preparations are so dreadful. When they announce the sentence, and prepare the criminal and tie his hands and cart him off to the scaffold, that's the fearful part of the business. The people all crowd round.
Did it just say words not to use and then say tapestry? How does it know? Boom. That's really annoying. Bam.
Even women, though they don't at all approve of women looking on. Well, at all events, it is a good thing that there's no pain when the poor fellow's head flies off.
This is actually really good. Bada boom, bada bum. Why is yo copied, bro? Oh, this is the preview. Why are you pasting in there? Personal made. That doesn't sound good. It fell off.
He remarked. Do you know, though, cried the prince warmly, you made that remark now, and everyone says the same thing, and the machine is designed with the purpose of avoiding pain. At this guillotine, I mean. But a thought came into my head then. What if it be a bad plan after all? You may laugh at my idea, perhaps, but I could not help its occurring to me all the same. Now, with the rack and tortures and so on, you suffer terrible pain, of course, but then your torture is bodily pain only, although no doubt you have plenty of that until you die. But here, I should imagine, the most terrible part of the whole punishment is not the bodily pain at all, but the certain knowledge that in an hour, then in 10 minutes, then in half a minute, then now, this very instant, your soul must quit your body, and that you will no longer be a man, and that this is certain. Certain! That's the point. The certainty of it. Just that instant when you place your head on the block and hear the iron grate over your head. Then, that quarter of a second, it's the most awful of all. I mean, I believe that to execute a man for murder is to punish him immeasurably more dreadfully than is equivalent to his crime. A murder by sentence is far more dreadful than a murder committed by a criminal. The man who is attacked by robbers at night in a dark wood or anywhere undoubtedly hopes and hopes that he may yet escape until the very moment of his death. No, it is an abuse. A shame. It is unnecessary. Why should such a thing exist? Doubtless there may be men who have been sentenced, who have suffered this mental anguish for a while, and then have been reprieved. Perhaps such men may have been able to relate their feelings afterwards. Our Lord Christ spoke of this anguish and dread. No! No man should be treated so. No man! A young fellow, Gavrila Ardalionovich Ivolgin, entered the anteroom at this moment with a bundle of papers in his hand. The footman hastened to help him take off his overcoat. The new arrival glanced at the prince out of the corners of his eyes. "This gentleman declares, Gavrila Ardalionovich," began the man, confidentially and almost familiarly, "that he is Prince Mushkin, and a relative of Madame Yupanchin's. He has just arrived from abroad, with nothing but a bundle by way of luggage." The prince did not hear the rest, because at this point the servant continued his communication in a whisper. Gavrila Ardalionovich listened attentively, and gazed at the prince with great curiosity. At last he motioned the man aside, and stepped hurriedly towards the prince. "Are you Prince Mushkin?" he asked with the greatest courtesy and amiability. Gavrila Ivolgin, or Ganya, as he was called by his friends and family, was a trusted member of one of General Yupanchin's companies. He was a remarkably handsome young fellow of some 28 summers, fair and of middle height. He wore a small beard, and his face was most intelligent. Yet his smile, in spite of its sweetness, was a little thin, if I may so call it, and showed his teeth too evenly. His gaze, though decidedly good-humoured and ingenuous, was a trifle too inquisitive and intent to be altogether agreeable. "Was it not you, then, who sent a letter a year or less ago, from Switzerland, I think it was, to Mrs. Yupanchin?" "It was." "Oh, then of course they will remember who you are. You wish to see the general? I'll tell him at once." A couple of minutes later the door opened again, and the affable voice of Gavrila cried, "Come in, please, Prince."
Access files on a network volume? What the hell is Codex doing, man? So I think I want to like
Compassion was the most important, perhaps the sole law of human existence.
The process for deciding what is good is an ongoing struggle. Our preferences are shaped and changed by our experiences, the people we meet, and even our beliefs. But how do we come to a common understanding with so many differing opinions? Sometimes it's easier to just surround yourself with people who think the same or believe the same way. But this isn't representative of our daily lives and who we interact with. The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky is a book with a large cast of characters, and it takes the most wholesome and innocent individual perhaps ever to be born, and throws him into the middle of a society enraptured with its own desires and materialistic needs. What would happen to this person? If they were giving, when would it be too much? If they were always helping, when would they be too naive for the situation? And if they're too nice, when would they just be taken advantage of? Hot off the tails of the publishing success known as Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky released The Idiot in 1869, a book that didn't achieve the same level of critical acclaim, but still found a core group of readers who loved it. Unlike his other books, there is no central or iconic scene like the Napoleonic Man or the Grand Inquisitor, and maybe that's what makes this novel more approachable, because it takes the everyday struggle of the everyday man and makes it visible. Acclaimed biographer Joseph Frank even wrote about how personal this story was to Dostoevsky. That is to say, to understand this book is to understand Dostoevsky. There's a belief that the moment before your death, your entire life flashes before your eyes. In that moment, you'll gain the clarity of the most important things in your life. Dostoevsky took this into his main character, Prince Mishkin, to represent the highest ideals of kindness and love, his Christian ideal man who only had the best of intentions for others, but stuck him in a society mired in the sloth of the material and quotidian. What would happen? Would he push others to see his way, or would they push him to compromise? Who will break first in The Idiot? This is part of our Before You Read series where we take life-changing books and talk about what they could mean in our modern lives.
Whether you're someone looking to tackle your first large novel or working your way through all of Dostoevsky's works, we're putting together this brief list of things that you need to know before you start The Idiot.
We're going to go through some of the context, why it's important, and some themes to help you get the most out of your reading of this book.
At the end of putting all of this together and editing for clear plot spoilers, it's worth pointing out that the term spoilers is very subjective.
So the plan for today, we started off with a little bit of a skit of what you're getting with this novel to get you excited. Up next, we're going to talk about expectations versus reality, author and the publication info, Dostoevsky's challenge with this novel, a tumultuous time of the culture, and the road ahead. But first up, expectations versus reality.
Expectation number 1. The cast of characters is too large. I can't keep all these characters straight.
Dostoevsky is the best at writing characters, and he's probably the one author you want to have spend a little bit more time working out what each of these characters means. Luckily, there's kind of like a core group, and he's going to need a large array of supporting characters to move these characters around and explore his main ideas and themes.
It's also a Russian novel. That means lots of pages and lots of details. But details matter. It's these small acts of kindness and compassion of where the book excels, and that may be challenging for some. But my advice, slow down.
This is a meditation of society, life, and kindness. And by the end, you're just hanging out with your small group of 4 or 5 friends that have 4 or 5 names. It's fine. You're good.
Expectation number 2. The psychology is too intense, and I won't understand everything in the novel.
Well, you might be in the same boat as Dostoevsky, as having just recently kind of been coined in the mid-1800s, Dostoevsky himself would have very limited experience with psychology.
Even today, modern psychologists look to Dostoevsky's characters for a sense of realism, and famed philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche described Dostoevsky as the only person who ever taught me anything about psychology. End quote.
He had perhaps some of the greatest insights into our own humanity, where it doesn't matter whether he was writing psychology. He was writing real people that we see and recognize in our normal lives in this novel.
Expectation number 3. The pacing is so slow. All these old novels just got paid by the word count.
Sometimes exploring human nature takes time, and instead of just offering a bunch of platitudes that sound nice, Dostoevsky challenges his own beliefs and own expectations of humanity to get us to a closer form of truth. But to understand this book is to understand Dostoevsky, the writer.
Dostoevsky took a long time to get this novel into our hands. Quote, "We know from the notebooks at Dostoevsky had great difficulty in projecting the plot of The Idiot, and because of his commitment to his editor and his terrible financial plate, each section had to be submitted for publication before the next had been written or even sketched out."
And perhaps it's most telling that this episodic nature of the way that the book was written reflects clearly the epileptic mode of the book. I quote, "The novel also shows this epileptic pattern in its larger structure. The action seems to progress unevenly in waves of tension that gather and burst in climactic scenes of spectacular emotional violence, leaving the narrative energy of this novel depleted and for a time directionless, until a new wave of tension begins to accumulate." So maybe in the same way that epilepsy helped Dostoevsky as a person find his moral center, so too does the episodic nature allow us to challenge our own morality expectations.
And for this novel, Prince Mishkin very much is the moral compass. In a society that's a little bit crazy, it's the start and restart that allows us as the reader to challenge what we think is the right thing to do.
And another highly biographical element to Dostoevsky's life is the reprieve from the firing squad. In 1849, he was sentenced to death, and moments before the firing...
What happens when a really good person steps into a world that's not so good? That's the story of The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. The book follows Prince Mishkin, a man who's honest and kind as he returns to Russia. He meets many people who are often tricky and selfish. His goodness shows us a lot about them. This novel is about seeing if good can really work when everything around you isn't. It's full of drama and surprises that make us think about right and wrong. If you've wondered about these big questions but feel like the book's 656 pages are too much to read right now, don't worry. I'm going to sum up the whole story for you faster than you can say existential crisis. So hang tight to get the full scoop on The Idiot, where we watch a really nice guy handle some tough situations and learn big lessons about life. But before that, tell us in the comments what other novels we should summarize. Now let's begin. So, our story starts with Prince Mishkin, a young man returning to Russia after spending years in a Swiss clinic for his epilepsy. On his train ride to St. Petersburg, he encounters Rogozin, a passionate man who has just inherited a fortune and is obsessed with a beautiful woman named Nastasia Filipovna. Upon arriving, Mishkin is set to reconnect with his distant relative, Lizaveta Prokofievna, and address some business affairs. Meanwhile, a complex situation unfolds involving Nastasia Filipovna. She is being pursued for marriage by a man named Ganya, whom she does not love. The marriage arrangement is seen as a solution by Ganya's employer Totsky, Nastasia's former guardian, who wishes to marry off Nastasia to free himself from her influence. As Mishkin meets Lizaveta and her family, his kindness and open-hearted nature draw them in. He shares his views and stories from his life, earning their respect and curiosity. However, tensions rise when Nastasia Filipovna visits the apartment where Mishkin is staying, which also houses Ganya and his family. Her unexpected arrival and the subsequent entrance of Rogozin with his rowdy friends escalate the situation. A bidding war for Nastasia's affection erupts, and the scene becomes chaotic when she mocks Ganya, leading to a heated confrontation. Later, at Nastasia Filipovna's birthday party, the tension peaks. A proposed game leads to confessions and uncomfortable truths. When Nastasia seeks Mishkin's advice on whether to marry Ganya, he advises against it. She announces her decision to the party, rejecting Ganya and causing a stir. Just then, Rogozin returns with an offer of a huge sum of money for her. In a dramatic twist, Mishkin proposes to Nastasia, declaring his sincere feelings. Overwhelmed but moved, Nastasia throws Rogozin's money into the fire, challenging Ganya to retrieve it and leaves with Rogozin. Mishkin, concerned and caring, follows him to ensure Nastasia's safety. What will become of Mishkin and Nastasia? How will these intense emotions entangle?
Okay, that's about it. That's all I really need to know.
General Ivan Fyodorovich Yepanchin was standing in the middle of the room and gazed with great curiosity at the prince as he entered. He even advanced a couple of steps to meet him. The prince came forward and introduced himself.
Okay, I can... come on.
Quite so, replied the general. And what can I do for you? Oh, I have no special business. My principal object was to make your acquaintance. I should not like to disturb you. I do not know your plans and arrangements here, you see, but I've only just arrived. I came straight from the station. I am coming direct from Switzerland. I have not much time for making acquaintances as a rule, said the general. But as of course you have your object in coming, I felt sure you would think I had some object in view when I resolved to pay you this visit, the prince interrupted. But I give you my word, beyond the pleasure of making your acquaintance, I have no personal object whatever. I thought of your family when I was passing through Berlin. They're almost relations, I said to myself, so I'll begin with them. Perhaps we may get on with each other. I with them, and they with me, if they are kind people. And I've heard that you are very kind people. Oh, thank you. Thank you, I'm sure, replied the general, considerably taken aback. May I ask where you've taken up your quarters? Nowhere as yet. What, straight from the station to my house? And how about your luggage? I only have a small bundle containing linen with me, nothing more. I can carry it in my hand easily. There'll be plenty of time to take a room in some hotel by the evening. To judge from your words, you came straight to my house with the intention of staying there. Well, that could only have been on your invitation. I confess, however, that I should not have stayed here even if you had invited me. Not for any particular reason, but because it is, well, contrary to my practice and nature, somehow. The prince's expression was so good-natured at this moment, and so entirely free from even a suspicion of unpleasant feeling was the smile with which he looked at the general as he spoke, that the latter suddenly paused, and appeared to gaze at his guest from quite a new point of view, all in an instant. You know, Prince, he said in quite a different tone, I do not know you at all, yet. And, after all, my wife, Elizabeta Prokofievna, would very likely be pleased to have a peep at a man of her own name. Wait a little, if you don't mind, and if you have time to spare. Oh, I assure you I have lots of time. My time is entirely my own. Just 2 words. Have you any means at all? Or perhaps you may be intending to undertake some sort of employment. Excuse my questioning you, but, oh, my dear sir, I esteem and understand your kindness in putting the question. No, at present I have no means whatever, and no employment either, but I hope to find some. I have always been an invalid, and unable to learn much. As for bread, I should think the general interrupted once more with questions, while the prince again replied with the narrative we have heard before. It appeared that the general had known Pavlichev, but why the latter had taken an interest in the prince, that young gentleman could not explain. Probably by virtue of the old friendship with his father, he thought. The prince had been left an orphan when quite a little child, and Pavlichev had entrusted him to an old lady, a relative of his own living in the country, the child needing the fresh air and exercise of country life. He was educated first by a governess, and afterwards by a tutor, but could not remember much about this time of his life. His fits were so frequent then that they made almost an idiot of him. The prince used the expression idiot himself. Pavlichev had met Professor Schneider in Berlin, and the latter had persuaded him to send the boy to Switzerland, to Schneider's establishment there for the cure of his epilepsy, and 5 years before this time, the prince was sent off. But Pavlichev had died 2 or 3 years since, and Schneider had himself supported the young fellow from that day to this at his own expense. Although he had not quite cured him, he had greatly improved his condition, and now at last, at the prince's own desire, and because of a certain matter which came to the ears of the latter, Schneider had dispatched the young man to Russia. The general was much astonished. Then you have no one, absolutely no one in Russia, he asked. No one at present, but I hope to make friends. And then I have a letter from, at all events, put in the general, not listening to the news about the letter. At all events, you must have learned something, and your malady would not prevent your undertaking some easy work in one of the departments, for instance. Oh dear, no, oh no. As for a situation, I should much like to find one, for I'm anxious to discover what I really am fit for. Capital. And your handwriting? Ah, there, I am really talented. I may say I am a real calligraphist. Let me write you something, just to show you, said the prince with some excitement. Ganya, give the prince some paper. Now, here are pens and paper. Now then, take this table. What's this? The general continued to Ganya, who had at that moment taken a large photograph out of his briefcase and shown it to his senior. Hello, Nastasia Philippovna. Did she send it to you herself? Herself? He inquired with much curiosity and great animation. She gave it me just now, when I called in to congratulate her. I asked her for it long ago. Now, I don't know whether she meant it for a hint that I had come empty-handed without a present for her birthday or what, added Ganya with an unpleasant smile. Oh, nonsense, nonsense, said the general with decision. What extraordinary ideas you have, Ganya. As if she would hint. That's not her way at all. I suppose you haven't forgotten about tonight, have you, General Yepanchin? You were one of those specially invited, you know. Oh, no, I remember all right, and I shall go, of course. I should think so. She's 25 years old today. And you know, Ganya, you must be ready for great things. She has promised that she will give a decided answer tonight, yes or no, to your proposal of marriage, so be prepared. Ganya suddenly became so ill at ease that his face grew paler than ever. Are you sure she said that? He asked, and his voice seemed to quiver as he spoke. Yes, she promised. We both worried her so that she gave in, but she wished us to tell you nothing about it until the day. Remember, Ivan Fyodorovich, said Ganya in great agitation, that I was to be free too, until her decision, and that even then I was to have my yes or no free. The prince heard the whole of the foregoing conversation as he sat at the table writing. He finished at last, and brought the result of his labour to the general's desk. So this is Nastasia Philippovna, he said, looking attentively and curiously at the portrait.
I'm struggling a little bit with the characters. There's a lot. Chapter 1, Prince Mishkin, the protagonist. He suffers from epilepsy. He was treated for this in Switzerland, although General initially funded his treatment after his death. Natasha Barashkova.
How wonderfully beautiful, he immediately added with warmth. The picture was certainly that of an unusually lovely woman. She was photographed in a black silk dress of simple design. Her hair was evidently dark and plainly arranged. Her eyes were deep and thoughtful. The expression of her face passionate but proud. She was rather thin, perhaps, and a little pale. Both Ganya and the general gazed at the prince in amazement. "How do you know it's Nastasia Philippovna?" asked the general. "You surely don't know her already, do you?" "Yes, I do. I have only been one day in Russia, but I've heard of her." And the prince proceeded to narrate his meeting with Rogojin in the train. "How did he strike you, Prince?" asked Ganya suddenly. "Did he seem to be a serious sort of a man, or just a common rowdy fellow?" "I really don't quite know how to tell you," replied the prince. "But it certainly did seem to me that the man was full of passion, and not perhaps quite healthy passion. He seemed to be still far from well." "Look here, Ganya," said General Yepanchin. "Don't you go annoying her tonight. What you are to do is to be as agreeable towards her as ever you can." "Oh," he continued, catching sight of the prince's specimen of calligraphy, which the latter had now handed him for inspection. "Why, this is simply beautiful. Look at that, Ganya. There's real talent there." "Wonderful," said Ganya. "And he knows it too," he added with a sarcastic smile. "You may smile, but there's a career in this," said the general. "You don't know what a great personage I shall show this to, Prince. Why, you can command a situation at 35 roubles per month to start with. However, it's 12:30, he concluded, looking at his watch. "So, to business, Prince, for I must be setting to work and shall not see you again today. I shall find you a place in one of the state departments, an easy place, but you will require to be accurate. Now, as to your plans. In the house, or rather in the family of Ganya here, my young friend, whom I hope you will know better, his mother and sister have prepared 2 or 3 rooms for lodgers, and let them to highly recommended young fellows with board and attendance. I'm sure Nina will take you in on my recommendation. There you will be comfortable and well taken care of, for I do not think, Prince, that you are the sort of man to be left to the mercy of fate in a town like Petersburg. Nina, Ganya's mother, and Varvara Alexandrovna are ladies for whom I have the highest possible esteem and respect. Nina Alexandrovna is the wife of General Ardelion Ivolgin, my old brother-in-arms, with whom I regret to say, on account of certain circumstances, I am no longer acquainted. I give you all this information, Prince, in order to make it clear to you that I am personally recommending you to this family, and that in so doing I am more or less taking upon myself to answer for you. I hope, Ganya, you have nothing to say against the prince's taking up his abode in your house?" "Oh, on the contrary, my mother will be very glad," said Ganya, courteously and kindly. "Well, what do you think of the arrangement, Prince?" "Thank you, General. You have behaved very kindly to me. All the more so since I did not ask you to help me. Rogojin asked me to come to his house, of course, but—" "Rogojin? No, no, my good fellow. I should strongly recommend you, paternally, or, if you prefer it, as a friend."
Okay. This is pretty cool. Okay.
to forget all about Rogojin, and in fact to stick to the family into which you are about to enter. No, you must really excuse me, but I positively haven't another moment now. I shall just tell my wife about you, and if she wishes to receive you at once, as I shall advise her, I strongly recommend you to ingratiate yourself with her at the first opportunity, for my wife may be of the greatest service to you in many ways. The general left the room. Suddenly, Gania approached our hero, who was at the moment standing over Nastasia Philippovna's portrait, gazing at it. Do you admire that sort of woman, Prince? He asked, looking intently at him. He seemed to have some special object in the question. It's a wonderful face, said the Prince, and I feel sure that her destiny is not by any means an ordinary, uneventful one. Her face is smiling enough, but she must have suffered terribly. Hasn't she? Her eyes show it. Those two bones there, the little points under her eyes, just where the cheek begins. Oh, it's a proud face too, ooh, terribly proud. And I can't say whether she's good and kind or not. Oh, if she be but good, that would make all well. And would you marry a woman like that now? Continued Gania, never taking his excited eyes off the Prince's face. I cannot marry at all, said the latter. I am an invalid. Would Rogojin marry her, do you think? Why not? Certainly he would, I should think. He would marry her tomorrow and murder her in a week. Hardly had the Prince uttered the last word when Gania gave such a fearful shudder that the Prince almost cried out. What's the matter? Said he, seizing Gania's hand. Your Highness, His Excellency begs your presence in Her Excellency's apartments, announced the footman, appearing at the door. The Prince immediately followed the man out of the room. I hope I shall not interfere with the proper sequence of my narrative too much if I diverge for a moment at this point, in order to explain the mutual relations between General Yepanchin's family and others acting a part in this history at the time when we take up the thread of their destiny. The eldest daughter, Alexandra, had imperceptibly arrived at her 25th birthday. Almost at the same moment, Afanasy Ivanovich Totsky, a man of immense wealth, high connections, and good standing, announced his intention of marrying. Afanasy Ivanovich was a gentleman of 55 years of age, artistically gifted and of most refined tastes. He wished to marry well, and, moreover, he was a keen admirer and judge of beauty. Now, since Totsky had of late been upon terms of great cordiality with Yepanchin, which excellent relations were intensified by the fact that they were, so to speak, partners in several financial enterprises, it so happened that the former now put in a friendly request to the general for counsel with regard to the important step he meditated. Might he suggest, for instance, such a thing as a marriage between himself and one of the general's daughters? Evidently, the quiet, pleasant current of the family life of the Yepanchins was about to undergo a change. Alexandra was a good-natured girl, though she had a will of her own. She was intelligent and kind-hearted, and if she were to marry Totsky, she would make him a good wife. But, suddenly, as it were, a dissonant chord was struck amid the harmony. This circumstance had come into existence 18 years before. Close to an estate of Totsky's, in one of the central provinces of Russia, there lived at that time a poor gentleman whose estate was of the wretchedest description. This gentleman was noted in the district for his persistent ill fortune. His name was Barashkov, and as regards family and descent, he was vastly superior to Totsky, but his estate was mortgaged to the last acre. One day, when he had ridden over to the town to see a creditor, the chief peasant of his village followed him shortly after with
is it doing this? What the hell? Holy shiza.
The news that his house had been burnt down, and that his wife had perished with it, but his children were safe. Even Barashkov. Inured to the storms of evil fortune as he was, could not stand this last stroke. He went mad and died shortly after in the town hospital. His estate was sold for the creditors, and the little girls, 2 of them of 7 and 8 years of age respectively, were adopted by Totsky, who undertook their maintenance and education in the kindness of his heart. They were brought up together with the children of his German bailiff. Very soon, however, there was only one of them left, Nastasia Filipovna, for the other little one died of whooping cough. Totsky, who was living abroad at this time, very soon forgot all about the child, but 5 years after, returning to Russia, it struck him that he would like to look over his estate and see how matters were going there, and arrived at his bailiff's house. He was not long in discovering that among the children of the latter there now dwelt a most lovely little girl of 12, sweet and intelligent and bright, and promising to develop beauty of most unusual quality. He only stayed at his country seat a few days on this occasion, but he had time to make his arrangement.
Holy crap. That's insane. 144? Is he talking about the B200? Oh my my god, I'm kind of like jealous. They're fully out of capacity. I don't have enough money to rent even like the smallest one. I don't need a week though. La la. This.
Great changes took place in the child's education. A good governess was engaged, a Swiss lady of experience and culture. For 4 years, this lady resided in the house with little Nastya, and then the education was considered complete. The governess took her departure, and another lady came down to fetch Nastasia by Totsky's instructions. The child was now transported to another of Totsky's estates in a distant part of the country. Within a fortnight, Totsky himself arrived, and from that time he appeared to have taken a great fancy to this part of the country, and came down each summer, staying 2 or 3 months at a time. So passed 4 years, peacefully and happily, in charming surroundings. At the end of that time, and about 4 months...
Sorry. $144 H100s. Brother. Then he said the first test was on an 8 B200, which is why it took so long. Brother. What? What do you mean that took long? That's $50 an hour for a GPU. Brother, that's insane, dude. That's actually insane. Genuinely insane. Oh my god, dude. I gotta finish my book, man. I'm not even halfway done. my teeth. My teeth are so cold. I think I'm like alright automatically disagreeing with this. Where's GLM5? I guess you can't really run GLM5. Boom, boom.
After Totsky's last visit, he had stayed but a fortnight on this occasion, a report reached Nastasia Philipovna that he was about to be married in St. Petersburg to a rich, eminent, and lovely woman. A great change now came over Nastasia Philipovna. She suddenly displayed unusual decision of character, and without wasting time in thought, she left her country home and came up to St. Petersburg, straight to Totsky's house, all alone. Her character was absolutely changed. No more of the girlish alternations of timidity and petulance, the adorable naivety, the reveries, the tears, the playfulness. It was an entirely new and hitherto unknown being who now sat and laughed at him, and informed him to his face that she had never had the faintest feeling for him of any kind, except loathing and contempt which had followed closely upon her sensations of surprise and bewilderment after her first acquaintance with him. This new woman gave him further to understand that though it was absolutely the same to her whom he married, yet she had decided to prevent this marriage, for no particular reason, but that she chose to do so, and because she wished to amuse herself at his expense, for that it was quite her turn to laugh a little now. Here the sound judgment of Totsky stood him in good stead. He realized that Nastasia Philipovna must be well aware that she could do nothing by legal means to injure him, and that her flashing eyes betrayed some entirely different intention. Nastasia Philipovna was quite capable of ruining herself, and even of perpetrating something which would send her to Siberia, for the mere pleasure of injuring a man for whom she had developed so inhuman a sense of loathing and contempt. He knew well that Nastasia thoroughly understood him, and where to wound him, and how, and therefore, as the marriage was still only an embryo, Totsky decided to conciliate her by giving it up. His decision was strengthened by the fact that Nastasia Philipovna had curiously altered of late. It would be difficult to conceive how different she was, physically, at the present time, to the girl of a few years ago. She was pretty then, but now... 5 years of this Petersburg life went by, and, of course, during that time a great deal happened. Totsky's position was very uncomfortable. Having funked once, he could not totally regain his ease. He was afraid. He did not know why, but he was simply afraid of Nastasia Philipovna. And it was at this moment that General Yepanchin began to play so large and important a part in the story. When Totsky had approached the general with his request for friendly counsel as to a marriage with one of his daughters, he had made a full and candid confession. He had said that he intended to stop at no means to obtain his freedom. Even if Nastasia were to promise to leave him entirely alone in future, he would not, he said, believe and trust her. Words were not enough for him. He must have solid guarantees of some sort. So, he and the general determined to try what an attempt to appeal to her heart would effect. General Yepanchin took up his part and spoke in the character of father of a family. He then pointed out that the fate of his daughter, and very likely of both his other daughters, now hung upon her reply. To Nastasia's question as to what they wished her to do, Totsky confessed that he had been so frightened by her 5 years ago that he could never now be entirely comfortable until she herself married. He very well knew, he said, that a certain young gentleman of good family, namely Gavrila Ardalionovitch Ivolgin, with whom she was acquainted, and whom she received at her house, had long loved her passionately, and would give his life for some response from her. Having remarked how difficult it was for him, of all people, to speak to her of these matters, Totsky concluded by saying that he trusted Nastasia Philipovna would not look with contempt upon him if he now expressed his sincere desire to guarantee her future by a gift of 75,000 roubles. First with a sad smile, and then with a twinkle of merriment in her eyes, she admitted that such a storm as that of 5 years ago was now quite out of the question. She said that she had long since changed her views of things, and recognized that facts must be taken into consideration in spite of the feelings of the heart. What was done and ended, and she could not understand why Totsky should still feel alarmed. Before long, Nastasia and Gania had talked the matter over. Very little was said. Her modesty seemed to suffer under the infliction of discussing such a question, but she recognized his love on the understanding that she bound herself to nothing whatever, and that she reserved the right to say no up to the very hour of the marriage ceremony. Gania was to have the same right of refusal at the last moment. It soon became clear to Gania, after scenes of wrath and quarrellings at the domestic hearth, that his family was seriously opposed to the match, and that Nastasia was aware of this fact was equally evident. She said nothing about it, though he daily expected her to do so. Mrs. General Yepanchin was a proud woman by nature. What must her feelings have been when she heard that Prince Mushkin, the last of his and her line, had arrived in beggar's guise, a wretched idiot, a recipient of charity, all of which details the General gave out for greater effect. He's quite a child, such a pathetic-looking fellow, too, and he seems to have some kind of nervous fits. The General rang the bell and gave orders that the Prince should be shown in. "Only on condition that he has a napkin under his chin at lunch, then," said Mrs. Epanchin. "And let Fyodor or Mavra stand behind him while he eats. Is he quiet when he has these fits? He doesn't show violence, does he?" The Prince was led into the room. "Yes, come along, Prince," said the mother. "Are you very hungry?" "Yes, I must say that I am pretty hungry, thanks very much." The Prince expressed his thanks once more, and eating heartily the while, recommenced the narrative of his life in Switzerland, all of which we have heard before. Mrs. Epanchin and the three daughters listened attentively. When the meal was finished, Mrs. Epanchin said, "Let's all go to my boudoir. Bring some coffee in there. That's the room where we all assemble and busy ourselves as we like best," she explained. "I want to hear you relate something. I wish to make sure of you first, and then tell my old friend, Princess Bielokonsky, about you. I wish you to know all the good people and to interest them. I lived almost all the while in one little Swiss village. What can I teach you? At first, I was only just not bored. Then my health began to improve. Then every day became dearer and more precious to me. And the longer I stayed, the dearer became the time to me. I used to watch the line where the earth and sky met, and longed to go and seek there for the key of all mysteries, thinking that I might find there a new life, perhaps some great city where life should be grander and richer. And then it struck me that life may be grand enough, even in a prison. All this is pure philosophy," said Adelaida. "You are a philosopher, Prince, and
Dude. I'm taking a break.
This sweater is advertised to last 100 years. And so are a bunch of other items that I found on a subreddit called Buy It for Life. And in a world of monthly subscriptions and products designed to break so that you buy new ones, this buy it once, buy it for life concept is kind of a breath of fresh air. Only issue is these products are expensive. So I gathered the most popular buy it for life items to see if they're actually worth buying for life. Of course, starting with the $400 sweater. It's by a company called Volleback, and it's literally called the 100-year crewneck sweatshirt. It feels pretty rough on the outside, kind of like a Kevlar type thing, and then it's super soft on the inside. I feel like the stitching looks pretty solid. I'm not a stitching expert. Now on the website, it says this thing is supposed to be fire resistant.
And sure enough, it easily passed this moving glider test.
This is like level 2 armor.
So I later put a still flame to it and it wouldn't catch fire even after 3 minutes of direct contact. It got brittle, but didn't catch. So I whipped out a blowtorch, which absolutely fried the sweater, but still no fire.
It's also supposed to be water repellent. I mean, that's not as impressive as the fire, but I love how that beads off. That's pretty cool. However, I also bought this sweater from H&M for 29 bucks. I mean, maybe the seams aren't as high quality. It's probably not fire resistant, but it's 10 times cheaper.
The 3 parameters that this subreddit outlines are: is the product durable, is it quality, and is it practical? The 100-year sweater is fairly durable, decent quality, but because of the price point, I don't think it's practical at all. I'm not saying fast fashion is the answer, but I don't think this is a valid buy at 400 bucks. Now, a ton of the most upvoted posts on this entire subreddit are about older cars. And when I think reliable older car,
I think old Toyota pickup truck. Of course, one that you have to drive 2 hours to pick up off Facebook.
if something breaks on this truck, it's not going to be that difficult to fix. There's no special tool you'll need or proprietary software. Replacement parts won't be expensive, and there's just not as many things that can break.
I feel like being able to fix and work on and even improve an item is really in the spirit of Buy It for Life.
There's something to the aesthetic of older cars. I love how compact this truck is. All the tactile physical buttons, which are holding up 24 years and almost 200,000 miles later.
Now, the two major downsides that come with older cars is one, they're most likely going to require extra maintenance, and two, the safety features are just not as advanced as they are on modern cars.
Although less safety features is not great for lifespan, it does make for a much more raw driving experience.
Anytime I get behind the wheel of an older car, I just get a sense of freedom. It feels like you're outside of the AI technology algorithm matrix. This right here is a completely valid buy.
But also high quality. These AirPods that I'll be giving away courtesy of Whatnot, along with whatever I'm about to shop for in the next $60, $50. The credit, since you can buy, sell, or and seafood. But I probably wouldn't want to store and then ship that to you, so let's just buy some candy to throw in the giveaway. Bid, outbid, bid again, boom. Got it. That's a lot of candy for 30 bucks. With precious metals on the rise, let's buy some gold. Got it. We'll add it to the giveaway. A mini silver bagel. let's add that in. These are real people selling anything you can imagine, and you can get some pretty great deals on here. So scan this QR code or use my link in the description to download Whatnot and get a free $15 off your first purchase anywhere on the credit to a major category. So they're mentioned for it to be nice, and I don't think there's a more fitting brand for this category than Benchmade. They're mentioned in like every EDC video ever. I've actually bought from them in the past, but here I have their best selling model, the Bug Out. In the box, it quite literally says yours for life. It looks really nice. It feels good in the hand. However, imagine my surprise when I stumbled on this guy at the supermarket for 10 bucks. It's from a brand called Ozark Trail, and people online have noticed that it looks suspiciously similar to the much more expensive Benchmade. However, some of the comparison videos I've seen were from people who work with Benchmade, so I had to test this out. Now it does feel a little bulkier in the hand. You can see it has the same type of release mechanism. Okay, that was definitely not as smooth as the Benchmade, but still pretty valid. Now the knives felt pretty equal when it came to cardboard. I couldn't really tell a difference with plastic. Rubber was easy to cut with both, but everybody knows you gotta do a big rope test, which it took just a few easy cuts with the Benchmade, whereas with the Ozark, man, I had to saw at this thing for quite a while. So the Benchmade feels better in the hand, it's slimmer, it performs better, it's the better knife. However, this Ozark Trail knife is like 80% as good, and it's 20 times cheaper. And here's the thing, because this knife costs 200 bucks, I probably wouldn't use it as sparingly as I would the $10 knife. If someone asks me for a knife to open a can of beans, I'm not tossing them the Benchmade, but this thing, sure, I don't care. So I would maybe even get more use out of the cheaper knife. Next up, maybe the most popular category of this entire movement, watches. People love the concept of buying a watch and keeping it for life, maybe even passing it on to their kids. So I've borrowed this $30,000 Rolex Daytona from a friend, and we'll be comparing it to the nicest watch I was able to find at a supermarket. Now I did buy a snack along the way, so my total was $15.49, but the watch itself was $12.98. First up, the supermarket watch.
The Bluetooth device is connected.
All right, now for the 3,000 times more expensive Rolex Daytona. Man, I gotta get my bread up. This is like 5 Honda Elements on my wrist right now. But here they are side by side. Both watches can tell the same time, and from 100 feet away may even look similar, but on the wrist, they did not feel the same. The $13 watch didn't feel real. It was super flimsy. You could probably even hear the difference. Okay, look, it'd be hard for me to justify spending $30,000 on this, but unlike, let's say, the Benchmade situation, I would rather have one Rolex over 3,000 of these. And it is something that can hold value, unlike, say, an article of clothing like the sweater from earlier that's gonna deteriorate and have little to no resale value. I think you have to be very careful and honest in this category not to buy something that you can't afford to impress people that don't care about you, especially since there's plenty of buy it for life watch options at lower price points. And when you start comparing an $800 watch with the 30 grand one, the differences in quality are nowhere near as extreme. So I do think if you're already gonna get one, this is a category where it makes sense to go buy it for life. I just probably wouldn't blow 30 grand on one.
Brother.
Excuse the jump scare. I'm not sure if it's just me, but it feels like for the last 10 years, the ads for this next product have been targeting me like a hawk. Buy it for life, refillable razors. I've seen the ads from Bevel and Henson, but after some research and looking through the Buy It for Life subreddit, I went with a Japanese brand called Feather that's been around since 1932. This is their ASD2 model, which runs for about 160 bucks. This is a disposable razor that I got for $1.25. And this right here is weeks of patience and dedication and getting asked if everything's okay. Now the packaging of the Feather felt very premium. It came with a shaver and 1 pack of blades. I first unscrewed the handle portion, which allows you to open up the head into 2 pieces. You can then take out a single blade and sandwich it in between. Screw everything together and it's ready to go. The cheap razor came ready from the factory. Let's see if it's any match for my beard. 1 swipe test, everybody knows the rules. It didn't get quite everything, but that's not bad. Okay, I have my thoughts, but let's now compare it to the Bite for Life razor. One swipe, once again, everybody already knows the rules. That took off a lot less, but that could be my form. Man, I really wanted to like this one. I love how it feels in the hand and how it's just a quality tool. And I'm sure it's mainly a skill issue. If I used it for 5 years, I'd probably get better at it. But this modern cheap one was just so much easier to use. It was also much quicker since I didn't have to be as careful with every stroke. You wake up a little groggy, make one wrong move with this, and you're gonna have a bad day. But again, skill issue. The replacement blades for this are cheaper than a disposable razor. So eventually it would cost less to use and operate one of these. Definitely a product that can last you a lifetime. It's just kind of up to you if you want to take on learning the skill of using one of these. While we're still in the bathroom, another product that's been hounding me online. I've gotten so many videos on my timeline over the last year or so, specifically talking about how great Japanese nail clippers are. But sure enough, it is referenced in the Bite for Life subreddit. People recommended these ones right here from a company called Greenbelt. I have no issue using my current random generic nail clippers, so if I notice any difference, I'll be impressed. It does feel like you're holding some sort of special high quality instrument. Okay, I was wrong. There are in fact levels to this. It just slices through like butter. It's kind of like cutting something with a sharp knife versus a dull one. Man, I think this is actually where the Bite for Life movement might really shine. This is a common everyday item that you'll already interact with for the rest of your life. And for 20 bucks, you can have a better experience every single time. Surprise sales training. Can you sell me this pen? Well, this company already did, and somehow they're able to do so over and over again at a $100 price point. I also have one at a $25 price point, and then bottom tier, we have these 50-cent big pens. There was over 10 years of posts about pens on this blog, but I narrowed it down to 3. First up, the $100 one from Tactile. This is a bolt action pen. Feels pretty high quality. There's no
Get some Uniball Kurutogas. I
Like-
guess those are pencils, but
advantage or use for it, but this bolt action feature is pretty fun. The mid-tier $25 one still feels fairly premium, and then the big pen feels classic. And now for the writing test. The bolt action felt precision engineered in the hand, and it just kind of flowed. It felt very fluid on paper. The rostering felt good in the hand, but I would probably replace the cartridge to something more smooth. And for the big, it just kind of got the job done. Absolutely terrible outcome for storytelling. The most expensive pen was the best, second best was the second most expensive, and the bottom one was the cheapest. I think a pen is a pretty good Bite for Life item until you inevitably lose it. So anything over like 30 bucks really stops being practical. This next item was also in every single Bite for Life list, every EDC, every gadget list you can imagine. The Leatherman Wave Alpha Multi-Tool. The sheer volume of posts and videos about this product was nuts. I had to investigate this phenomenon. But to do so, I did have to pay $200 for this. And we'll be testing it against this pretty generic $25 version. First up, the blade. On the Leatherman, it made easy work of this paper, while the generic one really struggled to catch. And things got even worse on the critical big rope test. It took just a few cuts with the Leatherman, while the generic version took a ridiculous amount of sawing back and forth. I almost rage quit on this one. I had to take a break and make sure the bottle openers work, which they did. Each tool also had a saw knife, but honestly, I couldn't really tell a difference between the two. I tried out the scissors, which were surprisingly slicing a little cleaner and easier on the generic tool. For the wire cutters, the generic ones were not able to snap the snail, whereas the Leatherman did so with a very easy, satisfying
for a wire cutter, that's not good. What?
Snap. Okay, the more expensive one feels better in the hand. The knife was way better, but the rest of the tools, they felt pretty similar. I believe the Leatherman costs about 10 times as much as this one. And apart from the knife, I wouldn't say it's 10 times better. But the gap in quality between these two was further than when it came to the Benchmade versus the cheaper knives. So although I can really appreciate the craftsmanship of this, it is something you could buy for life. I'm sure this would last a very long time. I just still don't know why I need to carry this around with me everywhere I go, like a lot of the videos I've seen suggest. I tried looking at the website and I don't think they even show a good use case. Lifting a hot lid, I can use a stick. I wouldn't want to use mini scissors to open up a bag of coffee. They're already in a shop here. I'd rather use full-size.
Does it have a movie? It's all in Russian.
Ваше превосходительство! Он. Как живой. Слышу, повторяют знакомое дорогое имя и припомнил безвозвратное прошлое. Князь Мышкин.
Точно так.
Генерал Иволгин. Отставной несчастный. Ваше имя, отчество, смею спросить?
Лев Николаевич.
Так-так. Сын моего друга, можно сказать, товарища детства, Николая Петровича.
Да, но моего отца звали Николаем Львовичем.
Как?
Львовичем.
Львович, голубчик, да я же вас на руках носил.
Да что вы говорите?
Да.
Но мой отец уже 20 лет как умер.
Да. 20 лет и 3 месяца. Молодой человек, как же-с? Вместе учились. Да-с. Стало быть, вы к нам жить?
Да на некоторое время, быть может.
Ну что ж, прекрасно, прекрасно. А нет ли у вас, голубчик, красненькой?
How old is this movie? Full.
Tangled relationships resolve. On the other hand, Nastasia has been really unsure about her feelings. She's stuck between Mishkin, the kind prince who cares deeply for her, and Dragozin, whose love is intense but also frightening. Mishkin is worried about her because he can see how much she's struggling. Dragozin, on the other hand, is driven by jealousy and even talks about harming her. Despite their problems, Mishkin and Dragozin still end their meeting as friends, though it's clear there's a lot of tension. After they part, Mishkin is so troubled that he wanders the city streets for hours, thinking hard about everything. His fear that Rogozin might be following him turns out to be right. Just as he gets back to his hotel, Rogozin attacks him. Luckily, at that very moment, Mishkin has a seizure, best self-defense method ever, and Rogozin, panicked, runs away. Once Mishkin gets better, he moves to a summer town called Pavlovsk, where he knows Natasha is staying. He finds out she's nearby because his landlord, Lebedyev, keeps track of her. While he's settling in, the Epanchins come to visit. Aglaya, one of their daughters, seems to really like Mishkin and shows it by reciting a poem about a noble knight, hinting that she sees Mishkin as a hero. But their peaceful visit is suddenly interrupted. A young man named Burdovsky shows up claiming he's the son of Mishkin's late benefactor and demands money. He's got a group of rough friends who back him up, but it turns out his claim is false, and Mishkin knows it. Still, he's so kind that he offers them money anyway. This makes everyone really upset. Elizaveta Prokofyevna, the mother of the Epanchin family, loses her temper big time. In the middle of all this drama, one of Burdovsky's friends, Ippolit, who's very sick, suddenly says he's dying and asks everyone for love and understanding. This touching moment makes everyone emotional, but then Ippolit turns around.
I'm halfway into this book and I low-key do not understand any of it, so I'm just gonna... I'm just gonna stop. It just doesn't make sense.
Out and starts yelling at Mishkin, leaving with his friends in anger. Just when things couldn't get more tense, Nastasia shows up in a fancy carriage. She shouts to everyone not to worry about some debt.
Fascinating.
Is there a case to be made that Brothers Karamazov is the greatest book ever written? Yeah, there's a case to be made for that. I don't know. Is it better than Crime and Punishment?
Yes, yeah.
You think so? Why do you? I'm not arguing with it. Why do you think that?
Well, every book is a person. Some of my best friends are inside that book.
Yeah, it's an amazing book. There's no doubt about it.
I think some books are defined by your personal relationship with them, and that one was definitive. And I almost graduated to that one because for the longest time, The Idiot was my favorite book of all.
Holy or.
Because I identified with the ideas represented by Prince Mishkin. I also identified.
That's interesting.
To Prince Mishkin as a human being.
The holy fool.
The fool, yeah, because the world kind of my whole life still kind of saw me in my perception, in my narrow.
Yo, do you have an estimate on how much you need for your testing? He works at OpenWriter? Oh my god. Hey. Oh my god, now Zach Mueller's there. Hold on. What is he gonna say? Hey. Oh my god, what is going on? Orchestrator. This is a word, right? Like, how do you spell this? Is this the Argentina flag? La 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 la. So he's quoting this.
Perception is kind of the fool.
Was I not supposed to ask for that much? Yo, this guy's actually the GOAT. Genuinely top 5 humans of all time. La 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 la.
One, The Idiot, an incomplete synopsis. Before we get stuck in, it's good to look at the broad outline of the plot, just so we are all on the same page. I will warn you, this is quite a windy tale with lots of twists and turns, so do bear that in mind.
I'm getting hooked up, bro. La 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 la. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. 60 USD to CAD. I've already spent $80 at OpenRouter.
As we move forward. And in case it wasn't obvious, spoilers ahead. The Idiot follows the young Prince Mishkin, who suffers from epilepsy and has just spent 4 years recovering in Switzerland.
Okay, so now that I have this information, I know the entire steps that I'm going to take to do this. I have $5,000 in compute on Lambda. I can launch some instances, like a singular H100. But also, I think it's more efficient for me to get some storage right now. So does it make sense? I already got my SSH key set up, but should I make a file system that has this stuff on it before I start renting GPUs for training, etc.? If so, how can I do this? And what should I download? La 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 la. Bro, I'm getting
He enters the story a kind and innocent soul, the sort of person Dostoevsky would want us all to be, and yet he leaves it completely broken. Our tale opens on a train pulling into St. Petersburg with 3 men on it talking. One of these men is Prince Mishkin, who has just met the merchant's son Rogozhin and the civil servant Lebedev. For any Russian speakers in my audience, please bear with my terrible pronunciation. Rogozhin is a passionate and virile man who is set to collect a large inheritance as soon as he returns home, while Lebedev is a good-natured but self-interested person who becomes sycophantic as soon as he smells wealth on the horizon. During the journey, Rogozhin says he intends to marry Nastasia Filipovna, the most beautiful woman he has ever seen, and our female protagonist. Nastasia is considered a fallen woman by the rest of Russian society. She was groomed and abused by her guardian, Totsky, at a mere 16 years old, and she wavers between outright rebellion and a deep sense of shame at what was done to her. Totsky, eager to avoid a scandal, has arranged for her to marry a rather vain man named Ganya, who does not love her, but has been promised a fortune by Totsky if he goes through with it. Upon arriving in St. Petersburg, Mishkin immediately strikes up a friendship with one General Yapanchin and his family. I'm going to recap all of the names in a sec, don't worry. He is a proud man and has a wife, Lizaveta, and 3 daughters, the most important of which is Aglaya, the youngest. Mishkin delights Lizaveta and her daughters with his stories, and is told to stay with the aforementioned Ganya, who is a friend of the Yapanchins. Here, Mishkin also sees a portrait of Nastasia Filipovna for the first time. He is immediately struck by her intense beauty, but also the unbearable depth of sorrow in her eyes. Later, at Ganya's, Mishkin is being introduced.
was a consultant. To people who write IQ tests for how to test people very high IQ. So what he was wondering was whether
To his family, when Nastasia and Rogozhin both arrive in quick succession. Nastasia reveals that she knows Ganya is merely marrying her for money, and in response, Rogozhin offers to up the price, saying that he will buy her hand for 100,000 rubles. Nastasia laughs at this, and Rogozhin runs off to collect the money. She then invites the assembled company to her birthday soiree that evening. Mushkin later appears at Nastasia's apartment when the party is already in full swing. She asks Mushkin whether she should marry Ganya, and Mushkin replies that she should not. And in response, she immediately breaks off their engagement. Rogozhin storms in with the promised 100,000 rubles, and Nastasia goes to leave with him, throwing the money in the fire and telling Ganya that if he wants it so much, he can go and get it. At the last moment, Mushkin shocks everyone by offering to marry Nastasia, but she's...
What? Okie dokie. La 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 la. So do some research to make this all work. I can just like quickly rent like a cheap GPU that you can SSH into and create a file system if that's how that works. Or just SSH into the file system. I'm not sure if that's how that works. The A100 is gone now. I turned that one off just because it doesn't actually do anything. I need much more compute for any of the things that I want to do. Bro, I need more compute. Stop using my compute. All of them are out of capacity. La 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 la. I'm actually so scared why this person isn't responding to me. GLM 5.1 isn't open source. It's not open source. Bro, it's not open source. How is no one saying it's not open source? Do. La 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 la. La 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 la. S tier model. Oh my god, I love GLM. Artificial analysis. Bum 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 bum. La 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 la. Okay, I'm gonna create a file system. Storage. Create a file system. Enter a file system. Quen Hermes training. Select region. Which closest? I'm gonna say, I don't know where Virginia is. Maybe Washington, Sydney. I don't know, which one should I use? Use Washington US East 2. Oh, sick. Create file system. File systems are... Oh my god. Do I get an H100 quickly up? That means I can't use my file system. What else? 8 A100? US West 2. Oh my god. Is that not what I'm using? Where'd all the compute go? I've been changing channels, I don't see them on the TV shows. Where'd all the good people go? Utah, North Texas, like bro. La 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 la. For helper instance, what I would do, first choose a training region. I don't know what's going on. Why is it using AWS? Oh my god, there's an 8 A100 stack up. I guess that's like a 4 H100. 1,800 gigabytes of RAM? Bro. Absolutely unbelievable. What is an S3 adapter? La 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 la. I did this one. I should not leak that. Let me turn off my screen. La, 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 la. La 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 la. Okay, I think I can turn this back on. Let me launch an instance. U.S. East. I don't know if I'm supposed to be Washington, D.C. Is there any Arizona, North Texas, Central Texas, North Texas, Utah, California, Virginia? Give me a. La 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 la. What do you mean, please hurry? La 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 la. What? 187 tokens per second? That's so cap.
Still leaves with Rogozhin, and that is curtains on Act 1. So, to recap the cast, we have Prince Mishkin, our protagonist, Rogozhin, an anti-heroic loose cannon, Nastasia, our tortured heroine, Lebedev, our scheming...
R clone.
civil servant, Ganya, our vain, money-obsessed gentleman, General Yapanchin, Lizaveta Yapanchin, and Aglaya Yapanchin, their daughter. Part 2 begins 6 months later, and Nastasia continually flits between seeing Mushkin and Rogozhin, a situation which slowly stokes Rogozhin's jealousy. He becomes increasingly violent and erratic around both Nastasia and Mushkin, though at the same time he and Mushkin become honorary brothers by trading their crosses, swearing loyalty to one another forevermore. Despite this, Rogozhin tries to murder Mushkin not long after, but Mushkin falls into an epileptic episode which scares Rogozhin off. Rather charmingly, everyone then goes off to the country for the summer, with Mushkin renting a dacha off Lebedev. One evening, when a whole cast is gathered, a group of young men storm in, claiming to be entitled to a portion of Mushkin's inheritance. It turns out they are not, but Mushkin still offers financial support to them out of goodwill. This enrages Lizaveta Yapanchin, who does not see this as the proper way to do things, and disappoints Aglaya, who was hoping that Mushkin would defend himself. The only member of this band of rogues we need to concern ourselves with is Hippolyte, a young nihilist who is dying of tuberculosis, and who oscillates between crying out for friendship and treating those around him with a cynical disdain. At the opening of Part 3, it becomes increasingly clear that Prince Mishkin is slowly falling for Aglaya, the youngest daughter of the Yapanchins. The Yapanchins, for their part, are growing increasingly frustrated with Mushkin's generosity and indiscriminate kindness, and are skeptical that this sort of person would be at all appropriate for their daughter. Mushkin and the Yapanchins step out for a walk, and who should they encounter but Nastasia Filipovna? She gets into an altercation with a military officer, and Mushkin steps in to defend her, much to the ire of the Yapanchins, though Aglaya also gives him a note, saying she wants to meet him in private later. That evening, Mushkin bumps into Rogozhin, and they have a heart-to-heart about many topics, including Nastasia Filipovna's strange relationship towards Mishkin. Mishkin also forgives Rogozhin for his ill-fated murder attempts, and Mushkin suddenly remembers that it's his birthday tomorrow, so they go back to the dacha for a drink. When they arrive, there is a whole party there already, and they are pontificating on a variety of subjects. Here, Hippolyte reads out an essay which contains his vulnerable reflections upon his approaching death, and, in his despair, attempts to shoot himself. stuff. However, the gun does not go off, and everyone mocks him, saying he was only posturing and never intended to do anything. Eventually, the party begins to disperse. Later, Mushkin meets with Aglaya, where she questions him about his connection with Nastasia, and says that Nastasia obviously loves him. For her part, Nastasia has been writing to Aglaya, declaring her admiration for Aglaya and supporting her potential marriage to Mushkin. Aglaya wants Mushkin to deal with this and also break off any connection with Nastasia. It is clear he must do this if he wants any hope of marrying her. And that is the end of part 3. Part 4 has a number of subplots which we will skip over, but the first big event is that Prince Mishkin is invited to a large society dinner at the Apanshians, where he will aim to demonstrate that he is undeniably a suitable match for Aglaya. Aglaya at this point still occasionally insists.
Aglaya. I don't like why no one's messaging me. This is sad, man. This is just sad. It's just worse than Quen 2.5. This would be amazing. La 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 la.
Insists that she doesn't love the prince, but almost definitely does. At this event, Mushkin embarks on 2 passionate rants and makes a bit of a fool of himself in the eyes of the assembled company, both breaking a glass and then having an epileptic episode. Worst of all, he seems to have no knowledge of how to act in the presence of his betters, always speaking honestly and from the heart. To try and put all of this conflict to rest, Mushkin agrees to a meeting between Aglaya and Nastasia in order to hopefully allay Aglaya's jealousy. However, when they get there, Aglaya spends the whole time berating and humiliating Nastasia, which Mushkin cannot stand. He tells her to stop, and she leaves in a rage, while Mushkin feels he cannot abandon the suffering Nastasia's side. As a result, Nastasia suddenly expels Rogozhin, and a wedding is arranged between Mushkin and Nastasia. In a lot of other stories, this would lead to a happy ending, but it simply is not to be. Nastasia leaves Mushkin at the altar for Rogozhin, who then carries her away to St. Petersburg, where he promptly murders her. Mushkin finds them there, Nastasia already dead, and completely collapses, going mad. He is found by the police crying with Rogozhin, incoherent and inconsolable. Mushkin is packed off to Switzerland, Rogozhin is condemned to penal servitude in Siberia, and no one is happy. Unlike a lot of Dostoevsky's other great novels, there is not even the hint of a happy ending here. It is explicitly said that Mushkin will likely be mad for the rest of his life. Rogozhin is not given some hopeful glimmer of redemption. Hippolyte dies of tuberculosis, consumed by his own misery, and Aglaya ends up estranged from her family. It is remarkable because of the despair that flows right to the heart of the novel, and the entire story rests on the remarkability of its protagonist. So that is an excellent place to start. If you want to help me make more videos like this, then please consider subscribing to my Patreon to both support me and gain access to exclusive content. The link is in the description. 2. Prince Mishkin, the modern savior. In his private writings concerning the idiot, Dostoevsky said he wanted to create a character who was beautiful. Here, he is not talking about outer attractiveness, but rather the kind of person that radiates beauty and beatitude. This was to be someone who was kind, generous, innocent, and above all, like Jesus Christ, who Dostoevsky admired above all else. I'm an atheist, but it's very easy to see the appeal in such a character, and The Idiot is by no means a book only for believers. Dostoevsky wanted to put this beautiful man to the test against the vices of what, for him, was modern society, and see if the two could be reconciled. One of my favourite interpretations of Mushkin comes from Anna Berman, and I'll be drawing upon her heavily for this section, although I'll also be melding many of her thoughts with my own. Something that marks Mushkin out as special is his innocence. He is not simply good in the way that ordinary people are, but begins the novel with a totally uncomplicated view of the world and of others as fundamentally benevolent. On the train ride to St. Petersburg, he surprises Rogozhin and Lebedev with how open he is, and at any moment he's willing to bare his soul to a stranger. This innocence also shines a light on some of the unkinder parts of high society, such as Mushkin's insistence on treating everyone from the humblest of servants to the greatest of nobles in the same kind, respectful, yet slightly casual way. Berman calls this the prince's initial naive state, drawing on the German author Schiller's concept of the naive. For Schiller, naivety is not necessarily a bad thing, and can signify a certain unity of character and direct contact with reality. Mushkin begins the novel blissfully unaware of the distorting lenses of social mores. In this way, he resembles both the Christ of the Gospels, who famously saw people's souls rather than their appearances or social status, but also arguably the ancient cynics, who similarly held social standing and money in contempt. But Mushkin is not critical like the cynics. He simply cannot make sense of what, for him, is irrelevant information, and so he treats everyone with the same naive kindness. However, this is not to last. Throughout part 2, it becomes apparent that no matter how straightforwardly kind the prince attempts to be, he always seems to be upsetting people or causing some kind of unwanted pain. For instance, when he offers financial support to the people who have come to try and poach his inheritance, he manages to offend both them and the assembled noble company. He has wounded the pride of the band of robbers, who see this as a show of contempt, and he has offended the nobility around him, who see this kindness as an unacceptable sign of weakness. It is a disturbance in the fabric of their social world, where such things are simply not done. Mushkin should be offended or outraged or challenge these people to a duel, but he should certainly not be kind to them. This particularly upsets Aglaya, who wants to see Mushkin be a man, so to speak. Both sides view him either as an idiot or a dangerous unknown element in society. He becomes suspicious precisely because of his principle to always treat people with the same selfless kindness. If he is so committed to that, then he will be a disloyal ally to any one faction or group in high society. And indeed, this idea is incompatible with the very notion of high society. I want to point out here that it is not that Mushkin is kind and incidentally something goes wrong. It is rather that something goes wrong because of his kindness. A trait that is ordinarily seen as uncomplicatedly good is corrupted by circumstance and starts to sow discord. Some, like Janet Tucker, have argued that this is because, for all of his virtues, Mushkin displays hubris in his willingness to go against the grain of social norms. But I respectfully disagree. I think that Dostoevsky is shining a light on how certain values and social standards can twist even qualities like kindness or selflessness into destructive forces. The trouble is that Mushkin and the people around him are mutually incomprehensible. They cannot understand Mushkin, and Mushkin cannot really understand them either. One of the most common thoughts that other characters have upon meeting him is the assumption that the gentle, kind exterior is just an act, and that underneath Mushkin must have some other egoistic game he is playing. This is especially prominent with more selfish or vain characters. Like Ganya. He is initially incredibly suspicious of the prince's motives because he cannot make heads or tails of them. The idea that Mushkin's persistent kindness to Nastasia is because he genuinely wants what's best for her seems insane to Ganya, who almost always acts out of what is best for his own skin. Not because he's a monster, but just because he's pretty self-concerned. And when they are not viewing Mushkin as potentially threatening, most people see him as basically stupid. This comes across most in part 2, where Aglaya talks about Mushkin as like the poor knight featured in Pushkin's poetry. Aglaya often mocks Mushkin for his persistent devotion to restoring Nastasia's spirits and helping to save her from her own self-destructive spirals. Aglaya certainly views this as somewhat noble, but ultimately also a hopeless task. And this is how the rest of the world views Mushkin's whole outlook. It is as if they are patting him on the shoulder and saying, "It's all well and good, all of this kindness stuff, boy, but do enter the real world." It is, of course, taken for granted that the real world must, by necessity, both be cruel and require cruelty. Even Aglaya's irreverent reading of Pushkin's poem still paints Mushkin as a knight, when, to quote Joseph Frank, nothing could be less characteristic of the prince than deeds of military valor. As C.S. Lewis would point out nearly 100 years later, there are few more effective ways to get someone to abandon their principles than to declare them childish or otherwise unrealistic. In other words, to convince them that they are idiotic. And the prince eventually does come round a little...
What? Peter Steinberger commented on my post? I didn't even know that. What are the chances I go and look at that?
to this way of thinking. He continues to act in a kind and selfless way, but he is now much less hopeful that any real good will come of it, or even that it is the right thing to do. He begins to scold himself for his outlook, saying that he knows he is stupid and that his thinking lacks a sense of proportion. He becomes suspicious of other people in a way he simply was not before. And what is worse, his suspicions are proven correct. He chides himself for thinking that Rogozhin is out to kill him, but then Rogozhin appears and does just that. He refers to his own ideas as humiliating and begins to see them as fundamentally childish, but he does not know any other way to be. Strangely, this is also often the case for the classic 19th century Byronic hero. Characters like Manfred in Byron's Manfred or Heathcliff in Bronte's Wuthering Heights both rebel against society and traditional morals, but tend to do so from a place of anger or self-assertion. The proposition they assert is that their individual freedom and the intensity of their feelings just matter more than simple social norms or even the power of God himself. They stand alone against the world. Though it seems strange to say it, Mushkin spends much of his novel in a similar position. He too is implicitly rebelling against his own society. But rather than it being a revolt of self-interest or of feeling, it is one of kindness, of loving your enemy. Throughout parts 2, 3, and 4, Mushkin often becomes deeply skeptical that his goodness will ever be reconciled to Russian high society, and yet he sticks to his guns anyway. His is a rebellion that comes not from anger, but from a recognition that even if this way ends in disaster, any other way would be agreeing that kindness and selflessness truly are foolish. And Mushkin is simply not willing to do this. To quote Simon Lesser, he suffers from the noblest and most endearing of all possible weaknesses, an excess of goodness. When Mushkin ends the novel, mad, alone, and broken, the implicit question hanging in the air is, was it all worth it? Was this a noble rebel, making a last stand against an unjust world? Or was this simply an idiot? Someone too stubborn to recognize the hopelessness of his one-man crusade, or even to know he is enacting it? Put a pin in this, as we will definitely be returning to it later. However, I want to turn from Prince Mushkin's unique approach to some of the forces which twist it into destruction, starting with Dostoevsky's sharp critique of many societal norms. 3. Society, money, and worth. Because of his pro-religious and anti-socialist views, Dostoevsky is often considered a conservative thinker, and I don't wholly disagree with this. He was a traditionalist Christian, a proud political nationalist, and a supporter of Tsarism.
Over the past 2 years, I've been turning my whole front garden into a secret underground garage. I've got access to this via the house and the workshop through epic underground tunnels and a mind-blowing vault door. But I built this room to garage my DeLorean, which means I've got to design, build a mechanism to bring the car from the top surface down into the room. And once it's in the room, I want to turn it round as well. If you thought digging and building this thing was hard, this is on a whole nother level. How am I going to do this? How am I going to get my car from the garage up to the surface? I have never built anything like this before. Okay, so what you're looking at here is a scale model of the end of the room where the car lift is going to go. Now, the distance between the surface level and the floor level is 3.4 metres, which is quite a lot. Now, the simplest way to do it is this. 4 telescopic posts in each corner with hydraulics in. The hydraulics extend, taking the car to the surface. Simple, it's very nice, but there are safety issues, there are height issues, and there's added complications that I want to be able to turn the car once it gets in the room, and I also want to use this as a bit of a work ramp to be able to work on the car. Now, this video is sponsored by Onshape, which is a cloud-based CAD drawing program, so I've drawn it in there, and I'll explain how I'm doing it. This is a section of the room that the car lift will be placed in, with the 2 walls at either end and the face of the opening to the surface. 4 posts will be placed in each corner with hydraulic rams inside. Each of these 4 posts will have an outer sleeve placed over them. These will all be connected at the top via a frame, but this will also support the top surface. The hydraulics will elevate these legs and frame and the upper surface, but it doesn't have to go the full distance. At the base of the room there will be a turntable mechanism. Within this turntable there will be a separate plate. This is what the car sits on. Within my 4 outer posts there will be a secondary inner lift. This will pick up and raise the platform that the car sits on, lifting it to the necessary height, so when the outer legs and frame raise up, they don't need to go the
Oh no, I lost some.
Oh. The full height to bring the car to the surface. This inner lift can also double as an inspection ramp to work on the car for maintenance purposes. When the inner lift then places the car platform back onto the turntable, it can continue down just under floor level, meaning the turntable can spin continuously, being flush and level with the garage floor. Okay, there's the challenge, but where does Colin start? Well, I'm thinking if I build one of the legs, have a look at it, see if I'm happy with it in the real world, and then we can take it from there. Now, the legs themselves are essentially going to be two bits of box section sliding over each other, but we don't want metal jingling around. We want to put some sort of sliding pads in. But there is an issue with box section. It's not always square, is it? I think we need to do an experiment. So, over to the guys at Newark Steel to bring me 2 flavours of box section to try out. So, we've unloaded, slates in the barn. Is this going to work, Colin? Okay, I was right to be concerned, but it's not that bad. At the end here, it's pretty straight, it's pretty square, but a little bit further down, it does tuck in a little bit. Now, rather than scrap this whole idea, I've been looking at how the telehandler does it, and I think we could borrow something from there, so I'm going to chop a little bit off the end here and have a little experiment. Just cut a bit off the end, Colin. How hard can that be? Well, quite difficult. When it doesn't fit in your bandsaw, you can't physically move it yourself or flip it over. It all gets a bit tricky. So, my initial idea was to get these long nylon pads, have them fixed up the entire inner leg, but of course when you go to fit them, put the bottom one in. When you go to fit the top one in, you can't get it in because the tolerances are too tight. Now, we need a bit of adjustment as well, so if we can't even get them in to start with, this is not a great start. Now, if you look at the telehandler, basically on the end of each boom section, there is just pads which sit at the ends, so we don't need it at the whole length, and that is under way more pressure than this is going to be, because obviously that works horizontal. So we're going to do this. Okay, this is clearly a better idea. Now, essentially, I've welded some plates on the bottom of the leg, and then the pads slide up between them, and then obviously to settle the distances and get the tolerances nice, you add some little shims above it to get everything where you want it. Now, the pads are held into place by these 2 bolts, and there's like a nut and a washer countersunk into the pad. But I've had an extra idea. Why don't we move these back a little bit, have another 2 holes here, thread them, then have some little grub screws or some other bolts which go down and just push on the pad slightly. So if there's a little bit of play in it, we can just tighten them up and take it out. Because all this is just to stop the foot rattling, so when it goes up, it's nice and smooth. Now then, what I'm thinking we'll do is I'm going to make a complete leg up, see if it works, put a hydraulic ram in it, have a look at it. If I like it, we'll make another 3. Now, rather than struggling cutting these myself, of course, Newark Steel, the sponsor of this metal, they offer a cutting service. So I've got them to cut 4 legs, which are just a little bit longer than what I need them to be, so I can trim them down later. Now, I've got them on the fabrication table, I've got all my plates cut up, I've got them marked up. Now, I've actually gone a little bit thicker this time. I've gone for 10 mil. Oh, God, I've got hiccups. I've gone for 10 mil rather than 6 mil. Oh, who the hell's that? Threading them up. Oh, I made this little jig thing, look. So you put it on the table, you clamp it down, and you can put all the holes in exactly the right place so they all line up nicely. Stick them on the pillar drill. I've used this wood bit, which is the whole thing which is countersinking. Oh, God, I don't know if I can use this voiceover. So I clamped them on. Yep, the countersink thing, you saw that. Clamping them on, get them all in a nice place, weld them on, lovely jubbly. To turn it round, I have to put a massive clamp on it because I can't pick it up because the thing's so blooming heavy. I then got 2 right angle clamps clamped together as like a bit of a height tester to see if the plates were flicking up. Clamped them down where necessary, welded them up, and your booty, it looks brilliant. Yeah, and these adjusters, they work. Tighten them up, you can see the shim just move ever so fractionally, so if there's any slight play, we can get rid of it using that. Fantastic. Right, the rest of the leg is complete. The top pads on 2 sides bolt straight onto the box section with adjustment shims slid in from the back. The other 2 pads are fixed to a protruding plate and are slid in from above. Now, we need a hydraulic cylinder with a 2.4 metre stroke. You can't buy them off the shelf, so temporarily, I've connected 2 shorter hydraulic rams together, back to back. The inlet and outlet ports have been connected together, connected to 2 hydraulic hoses, which will come down and drop out the bottom of the leg. As the hydraulic ram doesn't sit at the base of the leg, I've made this little extension table for it to mount on. This slides down the box section to hold the ram in the right place. And at the top end, I've fitted a cover plate, but to spread out the forces, as well as mounting a pin, I've also made this little cradle. This bolts on the underside of the top cover, and then the hydraulic ram's pin end sits nestling into it, meaning the force is spread up through this and not onto the pin itself. Okay, now in on shape in the virtual world, this slides up and down absolutely perfectly. But is it going to do that in the real world? So, while I'm putting all this together, Onshape. What's it all about? Onshape, the sponsor of this video, is a class not just it's of real Tolex man description, another route this could take of designing, and that's where you don't just have diamond reality. You're a professional for it. Right, Colin, deal onto a setting to see what it looks like in real life. So if you're a company looking for a new CAD solution or you're a professional user, Furs has got the deal for you. You can get Onshape Pro for 6 months for free. The link in the description. Go for it. Right, Colin, back to the project. Now, with all these pipes and fittings all over it, is this cylinder actually going to fit in the box section now? Oh, just fits in. Oh, thank goodness. So, with the cylinder in, I picked up the outer leg, shimmied across the workshop, and then using the fabrication table, I pushed the inner leg into the outer leg, slid the pin in, and then stood it up. Oh boy, is it tall. Look at it! It's a monster. I don't know why I'm shocked at this. I knew how tall it was going to be, but it's kind of weird because when you're in the underground garage, you don't look at it and think, oh, that's that tall because it's just a big room. But as a pole, it looks taller. Anyway, shims, they work an absolutely treat. The adjustment on them, took all the play out of it, beautiful. But does it go up and down nicely? Put a hydraulic pump on it and have a test. Okay, pump's connected. I've also added an extra oil reservoir. And off we go. I remember now. This pump's really slow. Yes, it is. But lucky for you guys, I can turn 10 minutes into 5 seconds. Okay, that seems to work quite nicely. Obviously, it's ferociously slow at the moment. I give it a bit of a wiggle halfway up to see if there was any play halfway up the leg, and no, the shim's doing their work fantastic. So I think let's put it under a bit of strain now and see how it performs. So I've got 2 ton bags of sand from a company that when they answer the phone, it sounds like they're questioning your sexuality. So surely a ton bag of sand weighs a ton, right? No, 770 kilos. So I had a little T-bar to the top so we could hang 2 bags, giving us 1.5 tons of strain. Right, here we go. Now I placed a telehandler either side of it so if there was any snappages or anything, it couldn't pull it over. And it took the strain, we got bags to spinning, they're off the floor. Feel the power! Yes, Colin. Now once the bag's got a little bit higher, I give it a wiggle, give it a kick, it all seems good. So I sent it up a little bit higher and then I lowered it back down again. Okay, this works. But am I happy with it? Okay, so what's this leg got to do? What boxes does it have to tick? Well, it's got to be strong, of course. It is the main chassis of the car lift, and it's got the middle car sort of hanging off it, and it's got the drive and everything else on the top bearing down on it. Now, I think we've ticked that box. I don't think it's going to bend or snap or anything. That is good. Now, it's got to have a 2.4 metre stroke, so it's got to be up 2.4 metres. It does that nicely. And also, there's about 1,200 mil of inner leg left inside the outer leg when it's at full reach. I like that, nice and stable. How much weight does it need to lift up? Well, there's 2 parts of this car ramp. There's the inner ramp, which will pick the DeLorean up, and the DeLorean only, and the platform it sits on. Now, depending on what car you park on it, that's probably going to be about 2.5 tons max. That's not too much. But these outer legs are going to have to lift everything up. The inner car, the platform, all of the chassis, the drive above it, which alone could be about 2.5 ton. And then also, what if Colin parks another car on top of it? You might want to pick that up as well. So in total, probably going to have to lift about 10 or 12 ton. Now, split between 4 hydraulic cylinders, that is not a massive ask, but it is something we have to think about. And as well as all that, it needs to be maintainable once it's all complete and all fully built. Now, these side blocks I put on the bottom ones pull out really easy and swap them over. I've tested that, absolutely fantastic. The top ones, it's a little bit trickier to do, but you can do it, even with the camera in the way. Unbolt them, slide them out, put some new shims in, brilliant, I'm happy. But the only other thing we've got, of course, is the cylinder. It is stuck in the middle of that internal leg and you can't get at it very well. Now, my original thought would be able to disconnect the leg and lay it down in the room. But now, as well as that being massively complicated, I've weighed these legs and they are 460 kilos each. So even with a winch somewhere in the room, that is going to be a pretty tricky job. So I think we need to look at the internal leg setup and see if we can get access to that cylinder while it is all still constructed. Now, at the moment, there is a lot of hoses on the cylinder, but once I've got the bespoke one, it'll be single acting. It'll only have 1 inlet at the bottom. So we don't need to worry about the hoses so much, but we do still need access to it. And I've got an idea. So I swung the leg round, put it back on the fabrication table and started pulling it to bits. I thought this was a good